The security guard's hand was still on Solene's arm when the elevator doors opened. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She simply looked down at his fingers wrapped around her sleeve, the way a queen might look at a fly that had landed on her crown, and the guard, to his own confusion, loosened his grip without being asked. Some women are born with that quality, the kind that makes rooms go quiet. Solène Vautier had it in her bones. And right now, those bones were being escorted out of the most powerful building in the city of Greyhollow, while 47 employees pretended not to watch. 3 days before she was thrown out, Solène had arrived in Greyhollow with 4 things. A carry-on bag, a first-class ticket she'd paid for herself, a sealed manila envelope containing documents that could detonate the most powerful family in the northeastern corridor, and a name she had rehearsed saying without emotion for 11 years, until she could finally speak it flat and clean, the way you'd say a word in a language you studied but never loved. Aldric Vael. Aldric Vael was 63 years old. He was the founder and chairman of Vael Industries, a conglomerate so deeply embedded in the infrastructure of Greyhollow that the city's electricity, water contracts, 3 major hospitals, and both newspapers were quietly connected to his signature. He was the kind of man whose power was invisible precisely because it was everywhere. He was also the man who, 33 years ago, had told a terrified 20-year-old woman named Celestine that her baby had died during childbirth. The baby had not died. Solène knew this because she was the baby. She'd grown up in Lausanne, Switzerland, raised by a warm and quietly sad woman named Hilda Vautier, who worked as a seamstress and pressed Solene's school clothes every morning with a precision that felt almost devotional. Hilda had adopted Solène through a private agency when Solène was 3 days old. She'd never hidden it. She sat Solène down at age 7 with chamomile tea and a bowl of raspberries and said very calmly, "You came from somewhere before you came to me. I don't know where. But you were wanted the moment I saw your face." Solène had loved Hilda for that, for the honesty, for the raspberries. Hilda had passed away 4 years ago, quietly in her sleep, the way only people who have truly made peace with their lives seem to manage. And in clearing out Hilda's apartment, Solène had found something tucked behind the false bottom of a cedar chest. A letter, a photograph, and a hospital bracelet, the newborn kind, with a name typed on it in faded ink. Not Solène Vautier. Baby Vael, female, born March 14th. Solène was a forensic accountant. She was precise by nature, methodical by profession, and had spent the better part of her career in Paris dismantling financial fraud with the quiet efficiency of someone defusing a bomb. She did not panic when she found the bracelet. She made tea, sat down, and began to think. It took her 8 months of careful investigation, 1 retired nurse in a care home in Greyhollow, and a private geneticist named Dr. Armand Frescott to confirm what the bracelet had suggested. Aldric Vael had a biological daughter he had deliberately hidden from the world. More specifically, Aldric Vael had a biological daughter, born of a secret relationship with a woman named Celestine, whom he had paid to disappear, and whose child he had told her was stillborn. The child had instead been handed to a private adoption agency with a specific instruction: place her far away, no record, no trace. The why was the part that made Solene's blood cold. Because at the time of her birth, Aldric Vael had been in the middle of the most important merger of his career. A merger with the Windermere Group, an old money dynasty so obsessed with bloodline purity and reputation that a secret illegitimate child would have collapsed the entire deal. Aldric had sacrificed a human being for a business transaction. He had sacrificed her. And in doing so, he had made one critical mistake. He had not known that 33 years later, the child he'd discarded would grow up to be the most precise, most patient, and most dangerous forensic mind in the European financial sector. Solène had not come to Greyhollow for revenge. She was too intelligent for revenge. Revenge was loud and expensive, and it gave the other person too much credit. She had come for truth. For what was legally hers under the estate clause, she'd had her attorney, a sharp-tongued woman named Berenice Lawle, quietly investigate for 6 months. and for something more personal, something she hadn't admitted even to Berenice. She wanted to look Aldric Vael in the eye. Just once. She wanted him to see her face and know. Vail Industries occupied the top 14 floors of the Greyhollow Commerce Tower, a brutalist glass structure that locals called the Needle, partly for its shape, partly because, as the old joke went, everything Aldric Vael touched left a mark. Solène had arranged an appointment under her professional name and credentials. She was there, officially, as a consultant hired by the board's independent auditing committee, a position Berenice had engineered through 3 layers of corporate bureaucracy, so clean that even Aldric's people had waved it through without suspicion. She walked into the tower at 9 in the morning in a slate-gray suit, heels she could run in if necessary, and the expression of a woman who was not impressed by marble lobbies. She had 48 hours before the meeting with Aldric himself. In the meantime, she had access to the finance floors, the audit rooms, and the internal digital records she needed. What she found in those 48 hours was worse than she expected. She'd anticipated discovering the paper trail of her own disappearance, the payoff to Celestine, the agency records, the deliberate erasure. She found all of that, neatly buried, but not buried deeply enough for someone of her caliber. What she hadn't anticipated was finding a second set of records. Records indicating that Aldric Vael had done this before. Not with a child, but with a business partner, a man named Corvus Westthal, who 20 years ago had co-founded Vail Industries alongside Aldric as an equal 50-50 shareholder. Corvus, according to the official company history, had sold his shares willingly in a buyout and retired to the south of France. According to the documents Solène found hidden within 3 encrypted ledgers, Corvus Westthal had not sold his shares willingly. He had been systematically defrauded, his signature forged on a document while he was recovering from heart surgery, his entire stake in a company worth, at today's valuation, $4.3 billion stripped from him without his knowledge. Corvus Westthal, according to a brief internet search, was now 71 years old and living modestly in Greyhollow's eastern district. He had no idea. Solène sat back in the dim glow of the audit room at 2 in the morning and stared at her laptop screen. She had come here for herself. But now she was holding the key to someone else's stolen life too. She thought about Hilda, about the cedar chest, about what it meant to have something taken from you so cleanly that you didn't even know to grieve it. She made a decision. The meeting with Aldric Vael was scheduled for Thursday at 11. He kept her waiting 25 minutes, a power move so transparent she almost smiled. When she was finally shown into his office, a room that occupied the entire northeast corner of the 52nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Greyhollow like a hawk over a field, she saw him for the first time. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of handsome that money had maintained past its natural shelf life. He had the easy, absolute confidence of someone who had not been challenged in a very long time. He looked at her the way powerful men often look at competent women, politely, assessingly, dismissively beneath the politeness. "Ms. Vautier," he said, extending a hand. "I understand you're with the independent audit team." "I am," Solène said. Her voice was level, warm, even. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Vael. I have a few items I'd like to go through with you directly." She opened her satchel. She placed 3 folders on his desk. She watched his eyes move across the first page of the first folder, and she watched, with precise clinical attention, the exact moment his face changed. It was subtle. A man of his experience didn't let much show, but the jaw tightened by 2 millimeters. The breathing altered. The hand that had been resting open on the desk closed slowly into a loose fist. "Where did you get these?" he said. Not a question, a very quiet demand. "I'm a forensic accountant, Mr. Vael," Solène said pleasantly. "Numbers talk to me." He stood up, and the pleasantness left his face entirely. "I don't know who sent you," he said, his voice dropping to the register of a man accustomed to ending things, "but I want you to understand something. Whatever you think you have, it won't survive contact with my legal team. I've buried better than this." He pressed the intercom on his desk. "Harwick, I need security on 52. Now." Solène did not move. "You might want to look at the third folder before you do that," she said. Something in her tone made him pause. Not fear, not threat, just that quality she carried in her bones, the absolute stillness of a woman who knew something he didn't. He looked at the third folder. It took him 4 seconds to understand what he was reading. The DNA report, the hospital bracelet photograph, the letter from the retired nurse, the adoption agency records with his own signature on the directive. The birth date. His face did something she hadn't expected. It didn't go hard. It didn't go cold. It cracked, briefly, just at the edges with something that looked almost like old grief, and Solène hated that it complicated things, hated that it made him human for half a second, before the crack sealed itself shut, and the chairman of Vael Industries stood before her again, composed and dangerous. "Get out," he said quietly. And that was when security arrived. They were professional about it. She'd give them that. 2 men in dark suits, no roughness, just firm guidance toward the elevator, her satchel pressed back into her hands, her access badge requested and returned. The marble lobby was full. 47 employees. 2 journalists from the Greyhollow Financial Post who happened to be there for an unrelated interview. A photographer. And by the particular cruelty or grace of timing, Solène was never sure which Aldric Vael's son, Rafferty Vael, 28 years old, who had just walked through the front doors and stood frozen, watching his father's security team escort a woman in a slate-gray suit across the lobby floor. Solène held her chin at a precise angle. She did not look back. She walked out into the Greyhollow afternoon, flagged a cab, and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Berenice. "File it," she said. The second was to a number she had memorized, but never dialed. An old man answered on the third ring. "Mr. Westphal," she said. "My name is Solène Vautier. I'm a forensic accountant. I have something to show you. I think it will change your life. Can we meet?" A long pause. "How did you find me?" Corvus Westphal asked. "The same way I find everything," she said. "I followed the numbers." What happened next moved faster than Aldric expected. He was accustomed to being the fastest man in any room, and he had forgotten, dangerously, fatally forgotten, that speed is not always loud. Berenice filed the paternity and estate claim within 6 hours of Solène leaving the building. It was airtight. 4 independent DNA confirmations, a chain of documentary evidence going back 33 years, and a legal argument so precisely constructed that the judge who received it called her clerk at home that evening just to say, "You need to see this first thing tomorrow." Simultaneously, and this was the part Aldric truly hadn't seen coming, Corvus Westphal met with Solène in a quiet restaurant on the eastern side of the city, read through everything she had compiled, and wept. Not from weakness. From the particular devastation of a man who had spent 20 years wondering if he had simply not been smart enough, not been worth enough, to hold what he built, and who was now learning, at 71, that he had been right all along and wrong in the cruelest possible way. Corvus had 2 things Aldric hadn't accounted for. A daughter who was a litigator, and patients that had spent 2 decades calcifying into something very close to iron. They filed their own suit the following morning. The journalists from the Greyhollow Financial Post, the ones who had been in the lobby, had seen enough of Solène's face and Aldric's security team to make inquiries. By the time both legal filings became public record, they had the outline of a story. By the time Berenice gave a single, precise, devastating press statement on the courthouse steps, they had the whole thing. It ran in 4 national papers by Friday evening. Aldric's lawyers were excellent, some of the best in the country. They were also operating in a situation with no clean exits because the evidence was not circumstantial, it was architectural. Solène had not handed them a smoking gun. She had handed them the entire factory that made it. Aldric made one attempt at negotiation, a private offer, rooted through an intermediary, of a sum so large it had 9 figures and a decimal point. Solène declined without deliberation. Corvus declined with a single word that the intermediary did not repeat verbatim. Here is the part of the story that nobody expected, least of all Solène. 3 days after the lobby incident, while the legal machinery was grinding forward and Greyhollow had become briefly and intensely fascinated with the Vael family, Aldric Vael found her. Not through a lawyer, not through an intermediary. He sat down at the table next to hers in a small coffee shop near the Old Canal district, ordered an espresso, and said, without looking at her, "You're my sister." Solène set down her cup. She looked at him. He was young, 28, she remembered, with his father's bone structure and something in his eyes that Aldric Vael completely lacked. A quality she recognized because Hilda had it, because Corvus Westphal had it. The quality of someone who has not yet learned to be ruthless and isn't entirely sure they want to. "Half-sister," she said carefully, "technically. Does that matter to you?" She considered the question, with the same precision she brought to everything. "I don't know yet," she said. "Does it matter to you?" Rafferty turned his espresso cup in his hands. "I've known about you for 2 days," he said. "I've been angry at my father for longer than that but never had a good reason. Now I have the best possible reason." He looked up. "I'm not here to ask you to stop. I'm not here to defend him. I found you because," he paused, "because you're a person, and someone should have said that to you 33 years ago." Solène was quiet for a very long moment. Outside, a barge moved slowly along the Old Canal. Someone on a bicycle rang their bell at a pigeon. "I had a good life," she said finally. "I had a woman who loved me and pressed my school clothes every morning and told me the truth when I was 7 years old over chamomile tea." Her voice was measured, precise. "I'm not a tragedy. I want to be clear about that." "I know," Rafferty said. "That's actually why I wanted to meet you, because you came here and did all of this." He gestured vaguely at the city, at the news cycle swirling beyond the cafe windows, "without becoming what he is. And I've been watching him my whole life trying to figure out how people do that." He looked at her directly. "How do you do that?" She studied him for another moment. Then, very slightly, she smiled. "Good coffee," she said, "and knowing what you actually want." "What do you want?" "I wanted the truth," she said. "I have it. I wanted Corvus Westphal to have what's his. He'll have it. I wanted to look your father in the eye so he'd know I existed." She picked up her cup. "Done." "That's it. That's everything," she said. "I'm not interested in his money beyond what's legally mine. I'm not interested in his name. I have a name." She paused. "Vautier, my mother gave it to me. I'm keeping it." Rafferty nodded slowly. "And us." It was a brave word, us. She gave him credit for it. "We can have coffee," she said. "We can see what that becomes, slowly, honestly." She looked at him. "But I don't do relationships built on obligation or guilt. If you're here because you feel you owe me something, finish your espresso and go. If you're here because you're curious about who I am, I'm curious about who you are too." Rafferty Vael looked at her for a long moment. Then he signaled the waiter and ordered 2 more coffees. The settlement took 11 months. Corvus Westphal's legal team, his daughter Navine, who turned out to be as sharp and relentless as her father was patient, recovered $2.1 billion in restitution and damages. Corvus did not spend it on luxury. He established the Westphal Foundation, focused on financial literacy and fraud protection for small business owners. He said in a brief public statement that he bore no hatred toward anyone, and that the best revenge for stolen time was to make excellent use of what remained. He and Solène had lunch the first Thursday of every month. She discovered he made extraordinary chess moves and terrible jokes, and she found she looked forward to both. Solène's estate claim was resolved separately. She accepted a settlement that was fair and not extravagant, and used a portion of it to establish a scholarship in Hilda Vautier's name for young women studying forensic finance in Switzerland. She returned to Paris and to her work, which had quietly become something of a legend in European financial circles following the Vael case. 3 governments and 1 international tribunal had approached her with consultancy requests within the year. She found she was busy in a way that felt entirely like herself. Aldric Vael stepped down from Vail Industries' chairmanship 6 months after the filing. He did not go quietly, but he went. He released a statement his lawyers had written. Nobody who read it believed it expressed anything he actually felt, and everyone understood that was fine. What he felt was his own business. What he had done was the court. Rafferty Vail resigned from the company his father had built and spent 3 months traveling. He sent Solène occasional messages, a photograph of a market in Lisbon, a question about a book she'd mentioned, a voice note from somewhere in the Basque country where he'd apparently met a sculptor and was learning something about clay. She replied when she wanted to. He respected when she didn't. By the 18th month, they had dinner when she was in London, where he'd settled. Not obligation, not performance. Just 2 people who shared blood and almost nothing else, learning carefully whether that could become something worth keeping. It was not a fairy tale reunion. There was no dramatic embrace, no flood of tears, no sudden wholeness. It was better than that. It was 2 adults choosing, slowly, to be curious about each other. On the last Thursday of October, Solène sat in her Paris apartment with a glass of Burgundy, and the new case file Berenice had messengered over. A fraudulent infrastructure tender in 3 countries, 2 shell companies, and a paper trail someone had spent considerable effort making look like nothing. She smiled at it the way some people smile at a beautiful piece of music. She opened her laptop. She began. Outside the window, Paris did what Paris always does, glittered stubbornly, indifferently, magnificently. And Solène Vautier, daughter of Hilda, half-sister of Rafferty, biological heir of a man whose name she would never take, former discarded secret, present architect of her own entirely complete life, worked through the night, following the numbers home. She had been thrown out of a building once. She had walked back in through the courts. But the truest thing, the thing she would have told anyone who asked, was that she had never needed to. She had never, not for a single day, needed anyone to let her in. She had always had a door of her own.